This happened in one of the biggest hotels in Austin, Texas. I was one of their staff then, and I usually work from 12 a.m. to 8 a.m. in the morning. The hotel was an airport property, the kind of place where guests are transient by nature. I was used to the strangeness that airports attract. Delayed travelers, sleep-deprived business people, occasionally someone in a crisis because their flight had been canceled and they had nowhere to go. I had seen a lot. I thought I was unshockable. Until 2 a.m., the desk phone rang. Internal call from room 408. I answered the call. The voice on the other end was a man's voice, and the first thing I noticed was the quality of it. It was hollow. The man said, "This is room 408. I need someone to check on room 406, please. Something is wrong in 406. I asked him to explain what he meant. I asked if he had heard something, if there was a noise or a disturbance. He said, "She's been in there since yesterday morning, and she hasn't come out, and I think something has happened to her. Please send someone." I told him I would send security to check on room 406. He said, "Tell them to hurry. Please, it's my wife." I radioed security immediately. A guard named Phil came, and I sent him to room 406. Welfare check, guest in adjacent room concerned about occupant. Phil acknowledged and went up. While I was waiting for Phil to radio back, I pulled up room 408 on the system to complete my incident log. I wanted the guest's name for the report. I pulled the reservation for 408. Room 408 had been checked out at 11 a.m. the previous morning. It was vacant. I stared at the screen. I picked up the desk phone and called back the extension for room 408. It rang for more than 6 times. No answer. Phil's voice came over the radio. "Anita, I need you to call 911 right now." I called 911. I reported a welfare check at the hotel, room 406. Security on scene requested emergency services. The dispatcher confirmed and sent some officers immediately. While I was on call with the officer, the security guard came back on the radio and asked me to come up. He said he did not want to be alone on that floor. I called the duty manager, explained the situation, and she came to cover the desk. I went up. Room 406. I am not going to describe in clinical detail what Phil had found. I will say that a woman had been in that room for an extended period, alone, and she had died there. Medical examiner later estimated time of death at somewhere between 14 and 18 hours before she was found, which placed her death at somewhere between 8 a.m. and noon of the previous day. The ambulance came, the police came, the investigation ran its course. The woman was later identified. She had no emergency contacts listed. She had been in that room for 2 days. I gave my statement about the call from room 408. I showed the officers the call log on the desk phone system. The officers went to room 408. It was empty. No guest, no sign of occupancy beyond the routine clean state. The phone in the room, a standard hotel phone, hardwired, had no outgoing calls logged in its internal memory. But the desk system showed the call coming from that extension. That contradiction was never resolved. They ran the woman's identity through their system. She had checked in alone. There was no reservation under her name for room 408. There was no record of a husband. Her next of kin, located 3 days later, was a sister in another state, who confirmed the woman had been separated from her husband for over a year. He had died in January, 2 months before the night of incident, in a car accident. I want you to hold that information and sit with it for a moment, because it scared me for a very long time. A woman died alone in a hotel room for more than 14 hours, and nobody knew. Around 2 in the morning, a call came from the room next door. A man who described himself as her husband to the woman. I think about the husband every time, how he knew she was in that room. I have asked myself many times since that night what it means that the dead can dial a hotel phone but cannot save the people they love. I have asked myself what 14 hours of knowing and being unable to do anything feels like. I have asked myself all of these things, and I have found no answers. And I think that is the most frightening truth of this whole story. If you enjoy listening, please like and subscribe. I worked as the front desk receptionist at a private medical clinic in Savannah, Georgia. I had worked there for almost 2 years, and I had developed the kind of easy competence that comes from knowing your environment completely. On a Tuesday morning in September 2022, a man came in at 9:15 for a scheduled appointment. I will call him Mr. Carroll. He was in his late 40s. He signed in on the clipboard, confirmed his date of birth and insurance, and took a seat in the waiting area. Everything was completely normal. I checked him in on the system, printed his intake paperwork, and sent it out to him with a pen. At 9:15, the nurse called Mr. Carroll in. He gathered his paperwork, stood up, nodded at me as he passed the desk, and went through the door to the examination hallway. Around 10:15, I looked up from my computer because the front door opened. Mr. Carroll walked in. He walked up to the desk and said he had a 9:15 appointment. I felt something strange. I looked at my computer screen. Mr. Carroll's file was open. He had been checked in at 9:15. He was currently, according to our system, in the back with one of the doctors. I was confused at this time, so I said to the man, "Please, can I get your name?" He gave me the same name, the same date of birth, the same insurance information. I excused myself. I walked to the back and knocked on the examination room door where Mr. Carroll had been taken. The nurse opened it. Inside, seated on the examination table in a blue paper gown, was a man in his late 40s with thinning hair and dark framed glasses. I came back to the front desk. The man was still standing there waiting. I told him carefully that a man had already checked in for his appointment. He looked at me with a completely confused expression and said he had just arrived. He said he had been stuck in traffic and was worried he was running late. I didn't know what to do. I asked him to take a seat and told him I would be with him in a moment, and then I went to find our office manager. She came to the front, spoke to the man, verified his information. She pulled up his chart. Same person. She pulled the sign-in clipboard. His signature was on it from 9:15. She took the clipboard to the man in the waiting room and asked him if he had signed in. He looked at the signature. He said it looked like his handwriting, but he said he didn't sign it. The doctor who had seen the first Mr. Carroll came to the front at this point. He had finished the appointment, had processed the notes, and had sent in a prescription. He came to discuss follow-up scheduling and found himself looking at the patient he believed he had just finished seeing, sitting in the waiting room. We sent the second man in to see the doctor. We had no other option. He was checked in as the same patient, same file, and same chart. The doctor said later that the two appointments were identical in almost every clinical detail. Same blood pressure and same weight. The first Mr. Carroll, the one who had been seen at 9:15, never came out through the front. The examination hallway connects to the front waiting area through one door and exits through another door to the parking lot for patient privacy. The doctor confirmed the appointment ended normally, that the patient had left through the exit door. That was verified by a nurse who watched him go. We reviewed the parking lot camera. One man in a brown jacket arriving at 9:12, one man in a brown jacket arriving at 10:04. The vehicle in both clips was the same color. The lot camera resolution was not sharp enough to read the plate number clearly. We called the number on file for Mr. Carroll that afternoon. He answered. We told him we were calling to confirm follow-up scheduling. He thanked us and said he had a good visit. He made no mention of anything unusual. We never called him again. The office manager filed an internal incident report and told us not to discuss it outside the practice. She used the phrase administrative error 4 times in the meeting where we discussed it, and each time she said it, she looked slightly less like she believed it. I left that job 4 months later. Not because of this, but I will tell you that for those 4 months, every time that front door opened, I looked up with fear. I want to start by saying that I am a very logical person. I studied accounting, and I believe in evidence and facts before any other thing. I am saying all of this because what I am about to tell you is something I have tried to explain away with logic. For 3 years, I was working at a mid-range hotel in Columbus, Ohio. It was during spring of 2021. The hotel had about 140 rooms, a small bar that closed at 11 p.m. I worked from 11 to 7 a.m. in the morning, 4 nights a week. I had done that shift for 8 months before the night had happened. I knew who came in and who went out. On Thursday night in April, around 1:15 in the morning, the lobby was completely empty. The bar had been closed for over an hour. The last check-in I had processed was a business traveler at 12:40 who had gone straight to the elevator without making eye contact. Everything was fine. I was doing my nightly duty, reconciling the room charges, checking the departure list for morning, when the front door opened. He came in slowly. I noticed the slowness first, not the slowness of someone who was tired. It was deliberate. He was a man, maybe mid-50s, wearing a dark jacket and carrying no bag, no suitcase, no coat over his arm. Guests at 1 a.m. without luggage are not automatically suspicious. People forget things in their cars. People come back from late dinners. But something about him made the small hairs on the back of my neck do something I had not felt at that job before. I smiled the way I was trained to. "Good evening. Are you checking in?" He walked up to the desk and stood there for a moment without answering, just looking at me. His eyes were light-colored or very pale blue, and there was something in them that I am going to struggle to describe accurately. It was not emptiness. Emptiness would have been easier to deal with. "I don't have a reservation," he said. His voice was soft. I told him that was fine, that we had availability, and I started pulling up the booking system. Standard procedure. I asked for his name and ID. He told me his name, a completely ordinary name. I will call him Thomas for the sake of privacy, though that was not exactly his name. He stood with both hands resting flat on the counter, palms down, watching me type. I processed the booking, asked him how he would like to pay. He slid a credit card across the counter without speaking. I ran the card, printed his keycard packet, started explaining the breakfast hours and the Wi-Fi password the way I did for every guest, and then he interrupted me. "You've been here a long time," he said. "You don't usually work this shift." I stopped talking. I looked up at him. "Sorry, what did you just say?" He repeated the same word again. "You normally work evening shift, from 4 to midnight. And you usually switch shifts with someone named Derek, about 2 months ago." My mouth went dry. Everything he had just said was correct. I had been doing the night shift for 8 months total, but for the first 6 months, I had worked evenings. I had swapped permanently with my colleague Derek when he moved to a different department. The swap happened in February. There was absolutely no way this man, who had no reservation in our system, should have known any of that. I kept my face neutral. "Is it room 214? He said. I looked at the screen. I had assigned him room 312. "Your room is 312, I said. "Third floor." "I'd prefer 214, he said quietly. I told him room 214 was not available. He nodded slowly, picked up his key card, and then, as he turned to walk toward the elevator, he said something over his shoulder that I have replayed in my mind almost every day since. "Tell your mother I said the shoulder is healing well." He stepped into the elevator. The doors closed. I stood at that desk, unable to move for what felt like a very long time, but was probably about 30 seconds. I haven't told any of my coworkers about this, because it wasn't something I discussed at work. I called the security. They went to room 312. The man showed them his ID and confirmed his booking. The security officer returned and told me that the man seemed completely normal. He had no explanation for what the man had said to me at the desk. I requested that the security man walk the third-floor hallway for the rest of the night. He did. I processed no more check-ins that night. I sat at that desk and watched the elevator numbers like my life depended on it. At 6:48 a.m., 13 minutes before my shift ended, I got a call from the housekeeping department. They were preparing for checkout turnovers. I asked them to note that room 312 was a priority check. I wanted eyes on it the moment the guest vacated. At 7 a.m. in the morning, the housekeeping supervisor called me. She said room 312 had not been slept in. The bed was untouched. The bathroom was dry. The key card had not been used. And according to every trackable record, he had been gone before morning. I don't know who Thomas was, and I don't know how he knew about Derek, my colleague, or how he knew about my mother's health. At some point I was thinking he was some kind of private investigator. I have no evidence of any of that. What I know is this. Somewhere in my hotel, on a Thursday night in April, a man stood 12 inches from my face and said something about my mother's health, and then he disappeared into a building I was monitoring all night long. And sometimes I wonder if telling him that room 214 was occupied was the thing that saved whoever was sleeping in that room that night.